Hi there, this is Dennis Velco with OutBüro. You're listening to OutBüro Voices, where we bring you interesting, entertaining, and delightful LGBTQ professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders from around the world. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode, where we are joined with Saraounia Mboka-Boyer. And boy,
Perfect.
I did have to practice that just a few times, and thank you so much for joining us, Saraounia. So you have a very interesting role in an organization that, I'll be quite honest with you, I've never heard of.
Mm-hmm.
So until I saw some postings from you that caught my eye on LinkedIn, and it was like, I think it was like 2, possibly 3 postings in a row. I noticed a posting, and then like a week or so later, you caught my eye again with something you posted. And it was, and that's how it happens, right? That's how social media works. And it was all in and around inclusion and marginalized areas, but it was focusing on Africa.
Okay, fantastic. So, Dennis, thank you so much for having me on the show. I've been a member of OutBüro, I think, for about 2 years now on the LinkedIn group, and I've seen a lot of the brilliant articles and community strengthening work that you've done and that the platform has facilitated. So I'm especially pleased to perhaps provide a little bit of perspective from international development, international aid, the nonprofit space. So my name is Saraounia Mboka-Boyer. I am an African American in the sense that my father is Black American and my mother is from the Central African Republic. For those of you who may not know where the Central African Republic is, it is a country that is literally in the center of Africa, right on top of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I call myself African American in the sense that I grew up being too African for the American and too American for the African, which led to, I think, how I started to get more into the field of international work. I have lived across maybe 10 or 11 countries in Africa. My parents used to work for the United Nations and the US embassies doing grants management work. So very early on, I was exposed to international development work and working with local organizations, local communities on how to write grants, how to get money, how to get more resources, how to work with people and share the different skills that people coming from America, coming from the center of Africa, coming from Europe have, and be able to share that with people to develop and strengthen their work, the work that they're already doing. So I think perhaps to share a little bit more about how my childhood brought me to the kind of work that I do now. The first time I went to a workshop with my dad while he was working for the US Embassy was an HIV/AIDS awareness workshop. So from the age of 6 years old, I started to understand that people who are different, people who have different experiences, who may look different, are still people. Just because somebody has HIV or another immunodeficiency disease, illness does not necessarily mean that they are better or worse or any different than any other person. So from a very early age, I grew up with the idea that we are all people, or in Southern Africa, the concept of Ubuntu. I am only a human being if my neighbor is a human being. And so growing up in the different countries that I lived in, it was always the idea that you are no better or no different than any other person because you are American, because you are a foreigner, because you are a girl, because you have nice haircuts, you are the same as any other person. And so I think that having that experience as a young child, in terms of understanding the importance of inclusion, understanding the value that different people and different perspectives bring to different situations, is what led me to get more into the work around capacity building. And in a second, I'll explain what capacity building means, and social inclusion. Capacity building or capacity development is essentially the idea of sharing skills with somebody and helping them improve. Another way we can look at it, if somebody is a basketball coach and they're helping you with their jump shot and they're making you do drills and drills and drills and repetitions, they're developing your capacity. So when you get into the game, you already have that reflex. You don't even have to think about it. So my job is to work with nonprofit organizations in Liberia, in Congo, in South Africa, in Myanmar, in Indonesia, to think about how they can strengthen or develop their internal skills and strengths around human resources, governance, monitoring, project design work. So that way they're able to get, for lack of a better term, the big bucks from whether it be the US government, the European members of the EU, Australia, the African Development Bank. So I really work with people on how they can strengthen what they already have in their organizations in such a way that they can meet their own aims. And if resource mobilization and funding is one of those ways, then I will support those people to strengthen their proverbial muscles on how to do that.
Oh, wow. Very, very interesting. So let me see if I understand this and kind of recap it.
Sure.
You help the organizations, the nonprofit organizations that work with you in those countries to identify where, as an organization, they can become better as an organization, again, in management skills.
Exactly.
So that they then have the ability to apply for the grants and whatever other funding that might be out there, so that the grant providers realize that when they do provide these funds, those funds are going to be utilized appropriately, managed appropriately, and put to the good use in which they intend.
You got it.
Awesome. Wow. What a job. And I imagine that that's pretty challenging as well, because, you are also, we're so used to having the tools at our disposal, right? And just going, oh, well, let's just, if you want, good financial management, as a small business, if you don't want QuickBooks, there's lots of options. Use FreshBooks or whatever. Well, they may not even have the internet and or the ability to pay for those monthly services. So they might have a lot of skills that they need to learn, from like basic math to just basic concepts of financial management. Maybe it isn't that bad. Maybe I'm, because I don't know and I don't work with these people, I'm kind of just conceptualizing, basically taking an 11-year-old and trying to, teach them this, when it's, it's probably not that bad in my naivety. So in dealing with those countries, of course, we are focused on the LGBT community, and I've in our initial conversation, I know, as I recall, you were talking about the marginalized communities and LGBT being part of that. Could you give us a little bit of info as to what your work and or the organization does, how it focuses on the LGBT community in those countries?
Sure. So the work that we do around and with the LGBTQI communities in the countries that I mentioned really focuses on inclusion. Personally, I try to ensure that when working with LGBTQI organizations, I don't necessarily treat them differently than any other organization that I'm going to work with. So I don't assume that because we're an LGBTQI organization, we're not as good as monitoring and evaluation. We're not as good as leadership and governance. I come in perhaps then with more of an expectation around the idea that because LGBTQI communities are as challenged as they are, there are certain skills that one learns outside of the office that can be applied in their work. So for example, when working with LGBTQI organizations in Liberia, I do a lot of work around community mobilization for HIV prevention. And simply that means helping people do advocacy campaigns and spread the word on how to use condoms effectively, both male and female, how to go to clinics and get tested, how to provide emotional and psychosocial support when somebody finds out that perhaps they themselves are positive, their partner or somebody that they're staying with. So I really focus on those organizations saying, look, you all have come together as a community anyways. You have formed this nonprofit or this community group of yours. Let me help you formalize. Let me help you create a bank account so that way you guys can receive donations. Let me help you come up with a human resources guide. So that way, when you're hiring people, you can attract people to come and work for you or work with you that will support your mission. When we're thinking about organizational leadership and governance, not everybody is born a CEO. So we'll provide executive mentorship to say, this is how you run a board meeting. This is how we take notes. So it really depends on meeting with the partner organization and saying, look, where are you? And this is not something for you to, sell me a rosy picture. I need to know what your situation is. So that way I can work with you and go together with you to strengthen those things that you guys are doing well, those capacities that you have that are strong, and think about how we can bring in new perspectives, new innovations to meet the challenges that you're struggling with. And if that challenge happens to be finances, for example, I probably am not the best person to do it, but I will be able to connect you with people who run modules on financial management or how to use things like QuickBooks, or link you to a global coalition of, let's say, developing world actors that send monthly newsletters on financial inclusion or nonprofit management. So essentially, I work with LGBTQI populations to strengthen the things that they're already doing and help them be more effective, efficient, and more visible in that work, as well as then also working, perhaps we could say, more upstream with governments and civil society actors and private sector actors around the idea of social inclusion. How could it, benefit a private sector company to work with LGBTQI staff? And I will say, just because this person is a gay man, but he has a PhD in computational mathematics, you're going to miss out on this guy because you're concerned about what he does outside of the office? Let's think about the bottom line. Let's think about what you're trying to do and how that person can add to that, and how your company values can add to that person's experience and vice versa. So I kind of look at myself as a connector, a bridge, and an advocate or champion to support work that LGBT communities are doing, and support others in perhaps demystifying this myth of LGBTQI people are not African, or it's something that was brought by the West, or they don't exist here. Africa is and has always been an inclusive and multifaceted continent, with people who are gay, people who are straight, people who are undefined, men, women, non-gender conforming people, intersex people. Africa is diversity and Africa is representative. And so when I work with LGBTQI communities and people who affect them, I try to help highlight that idea.
Awesome. And challenging. Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome and challenging.
I'm giving you the good stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. And listening to you intently, my mind could not help but wonder for just a moment and say, wow. I mean, what you're even talking about would be wonderful for just nonprofits in general everywhere, right? I mean, I personally have been involved in some nonprofits in my past, in volunteering, and once on the small board, and this was years ago. But they were here in the U.S. and boy,
Yeah.
could they have used some of your services? And lots of them, from management to financial to just leadership and so forth. So very, very interesting what you do. And so there are other organizations when it comes to the LGBT side of the house, realizing that your organization focuses on everyone, but being that my focus is the LGBT community, and you're an out proud lesbian. That's why we're focusing a little bit there on that. But does your organization also partner with other LGBT nonprofits like All Out or other LGBT organizations out there that can help spread the word, get money to the table if possible, feet on the street and so forth? Or is how does your organization kind of work with your partnering organizations? And are there specifically, when it comes to the LGBT communities and issues that you serve, do you have partnerships currently with LGBT organizations, and if not, that's an opportunity. It's not a negative thing.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity. So that's why I thought this was so interesting, is to bring awareness again, because I myself have never heard of Pact, and it just sounds like such an amazing organization. So I'm so thankful for the awareness that you're helping to bring to your organization and what you do.
Sure. First, I have to correct you. I'm not a lesbian. I haven't cut off the other 50% of the population.
I see. No problem.
More so, I suppose, pansexual might be the term. It
Okay.
depends on who the person is, not necessarily what their sex is. And so, as I think that is something also that when I think about the work that I do with the LGBTQI, I think at times the definition of being a lesbian in my work can be inhibiting, in the idea that if I'm working with trans women, for example, that idea of seeing Saraounia as a lesbian may lead to people having assumptions on politics between lesbians and trans women, or women in general. And so, aside from it being my natural proclivity that I am attracted to men and women, I also think about how the identity markers that I give myself affect the people in which I'm engaging. Again, wanting to not center it around myself with Saraounia, but making sure that the spaces with the partners I'm engaging are more inclusive.
Interesting. Okay.
And so, as it relates to my organization, we don't have any formal institutional partnerships with any LGBT organizations. However, in a lot of the work that I do in some of those countries that I mentioned, some of our partners, or the the communities that we're working to strengthen their capacity and skills, are LGBT nonprofit organizations or advocacy or health organizations. I can name a few projects perhaps that I have worked on. And if viewers of the show are interested in looking up that project, they'll be able to see the partners there. But just for intellectual property purposes, I haven't been given their consent to say their names on the video. But working on a project called Linkages, for example, which is a global HIV prevention mechanism that my organization, Pact, runs with an organization that's called Family Health International. And we work with them in Lesotho, South Africa, Congo, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, to partner with local LGBTQI nonprofits, service providers, and civil society organizations. I do think it's something that at Pact we're trying to improve on, the institutionalization of this work that we do with LGBTQI organizations. Because we do a lot, I think that we're not good enough at highlighting that, at sharing the success stories, and perhaps being more explicit in the calls to the LGBTQI civil society communities around the world to say, we are here to support you as it relates to your capacity needs, your advocacy needs, your economic empowerment or financial mobilization needs. And so perhaps I could say that this is me making the call, that if you are an organization that needs support, as it relates to your organizational systems, management, or even gender and social inclusion strategy, please reach out. Whether it be, we sign a contract, or whether it be just providing a consult or advice, we really do want to be the kind of organization that acts as a network that brings communities together. Because it's not just Saraounia sitting in Washington, D.C. that can provide capacity strengthening and support to other LGBT organizations. It's people who are sitting in Botswana and Egypt and Myanmar, Burma, or Thailand or Nicaragua. And we really want to be the kind of organization that can act as an interlocutor to bring all those different groups together in the same way that you are, Dennis, in terms of the work you're doing with OutBüro, to kind of strengthen that larger community of peer mentorship and strengthening between LGBTQI communities and organizations that are led by LGBTQI folks.
Yes, and you hit the nail on the head, and because even just within all organizations, but looking at the LGBT community and so forth, there's duplicity of work, right? You have you have organizations even within the same country, within the same state, doing essentially, call it, 70% the same thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes, unfortunately, egos can get in the way. And, but realizing it's, and or if organizations would just work together, it doesn't mean that you have to disband what you're doing.
Yeah.
But realizing that strength comes through working together.
Exactly.
And putting the ego aside, you can still come together and say, it doesn't mean that you have to merge the organizations. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is just realizing that one, reaching out to whether it's Pact or other organizations. And so now I'm going to ask the viewers, put in the comments down below if you are aware of other organizations who help strengthen the work of the nonprofits of the world, well, wherever that is, and in whatever countries they are. I would love to begin to build a resource list so that people can find that information quickly, and hopefully have those other organizations, here on the show to highlight them. And do note, if even if they're not specifically LGBT, go ahead and make those notes down there. And if they are LGBT, just put a little focus there. Could you imagine? Just close your eyes for a moment out there. If you're driving, please don't pull over or wait till you get to where you're going. But think about all of the nonprofits of the world. And think about just limiting to our community in the LGBT community. Think about all the LGBT nonprofits in the world, and think about all that they have access to, right? A wealth of data. They have their membership lists. They have all of their donors. They have all of their skills and so forth. And yet it's siloed, right? It's siloed. It's working on this initiative in this city with this people, with these donors and so forth. Now, if we start to coalesce together and work together and think about what that means to open up the opportunities. And so what I'm going to challenge you out there is, and maybe even if you're a business person, but I'll keep it right now on the nonprofit. So if you manage or if you work with volunteers over the nonprofit, think for a moment, pat yourself on the back for all the great work that you have done, but give yourself a moment and now think about another nonprofit that is maybe outside of your realm, and how you can possibly, what if you were to partner with them, what would that open up for you, right? What does the skills of that other organization have that maybe you lack? What are their strengths? What are your weaknesses and their strengths, and vice versa, that you can assess? What are the opportunities? Might they be a larger organization and they have a much richer grant writing capability? Might their donor base be larger? And just, as nonprofits, sometimes and I'll say we have the fear that oh, well, if I partner with them, they're going to get the attention of my donors, and therefore my donors aren't going to give me as much money. It's like, well, wait a minute now. If you think about the strategic partnerships, that might actually open the donors up to go, wow, there might be more, or they might bring in other people, their other friends of theirs, other corporate friends, other personal friends of theirs that may not have been in alignment with you alone. But now that you're partnered with that other organization, now it makes total sense, right? Total sense. Let's get them in here, because now what you're doing, both of us like. So I see it as an opportunity, and that's, I strive, although I'm a entrepreneur of one right now, everything that I purposely do is I try to look for those opportunities to make those connections, and I'm always open to. Well, I know you have another meeting coming up here shortly that I don't want to make you late for. I think you've given lots of food for thought, and as you see opportunities to create insight, education, and awareness for our community here at OutBüro, and through all the channels that we're doing, again, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, soon, hopefully even Instagram TV, and on all of this will be deduced into an audio podcast on 13 apps. You know, think about how whether that's you or other people in your organization, how you guys can help raise the visibility of what you're doing, and help everyone understand what an interesting and very necessary job that you're doing, and appreciate you being out there.
Thank you so much, Dennis. And thank you again for having me. And to your viewers, thank you for paying attention. Thank you for listening to the work about the work that I do. And as much as you can, try to branch out and try to grow your networks and share with each other, collaborate, because I think that moving forward through 2020, through this pandemic and the world that's going to come out on the other side, we need each other now more than ever, and we're stronger together, more so than we are if we're apart. Thanks again, Dennis, and take care, everyone.
Absolutely. You have a wonderful rest of your day. Appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of OutBüro Voices. And collaborating together is very important here at OutBüro. And that is why after you create your professional profile, with just completing at least 30% of your profile, being sure to upload a great headshot with a smiling face and a header at the top of your profile that says a little something about you. Once and after you do that and reaching at least 30%, that will unlock all the features of the community side of OutBüro. You'll then be able to join groups and or create groups. So think about creating groups for your nonprofit organization, for your region, and for your industry. We would love for you to help build community here on OutBüro.com, where you belong and your voice matters. That is OutBüro.com. See you soon.